answers. Most of my questions are going to demand a yes or no answer. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay, my first question. Both sides of the aisle today have asked for your resignation. Would you like to use my 5 minutes to draft your resignation letter, yes or no?
No, thank you.
Was this a colossal failure?
It was a failure.
Yes or no? Was it a colossal failure is the question, yes or no?
I have admitted this is a terrible
This is a yes or no series of questions. Was this a colossal failure, yes or no?
Yes.
Was this tragedy preventable, yes or no?
Yes.
Has the Secret Service been transparent with this committee?
Yes.
Would you say the fact that we had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today as being transparent, yes or no?
I have always been
yes or no. You didn't want to answer the question.
Committee.
We had to issue a subpoena to get you to show up today. That is not transparent, by the way. You stated earlier, Secret Service is not political. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you say leaking your opening statement to Punchbowl News, Politico's Playbook, and Washington Post several hours before you sent it to this committee as being political, yes or no?
I have no idea how my statement got out.
Well, that's bullshit. So, have you provided a list to the Oversight Committee? Yes or no?
I will have to get back to you on that.
That is a no. Have you provided all audio and video recordings in your possession to this committee, as we asked on July 15th, yes or no?
I would have to get back to you.
That is a no. You're full of shit today. You're just being completely dishonest.
Now, Director Cheatle, would you agree that this is the most serious security lapse since President Reagan was shot in 1981 of the Secret Service?
Yes, sir, I would.
And, do you know what Stuart Knight did when he was in charge at the time of the Secret Service? Do you know what he did afterwards?
He remained on duty.
He resigned. He resigned. And Stuart Knight was not a Democratic appointee or a Republican appointee. You've got to have agencies in this country that transcend politics, that have the confidence of independents, Democrats, Republicans, progressives, conservatives. Do you really believe that the majority of this country has confidence in you right now?
I believe that the country deserves answers, and I am committed to finding those answers and providing those answers.
Well, look, I believe, Director Cheatle, that you should resign. I think there are colleagues on both sides of the aisle who believe.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about a very heated hearing that took place in the House involving the failed assassination attempt on President Trump and the Secret Service and why they failed to protect the President of the United States, and also why the Secret Service director, Kimberly Cheatle, still has her job despite what was a massive failure. Now, I can report I'm pleasantly surprised that this hearing was bipartisan for the most part, okay? You had Democrats and Republicans coming out here and denouncing the Secret Service chief, calling for her to resign or be fired because apparently she can't even answer very basic questions about whether or not there was a second shooter or how much training or if any training has been given to Secret Service agents on how to not let the former president or the president of the United States almost be assassinated.
So, was this attempted assassination of Donald Trump a failure of training or execution or both?
I think that those are answers that we need to examine.
Training, execution, or both? Which one?
I think those are answers.
All right. How many Secret Service personnel have lost their jobs due to this colossal failure?
At this time, none.
How many Secret Service personnel have been required to take a refresher course on how not to let people shoot Donald Trump?
Our personnel are currently operational. We are examining the facts of this investigation, and we will make the changes necessary.
What time did law enforcement become aware that there was an individual on the roof with a clear line of sight to President Trump?
I am still verifying timelines.
Of course, 9 days in, you have no answers. How many minutes went by between the time law enforcement saw and took photos of crooks and the shooting? How many minutes?
I am still verifying timelines.
57 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Anthony Guglielmi said, quote, "The assertion that a member of the former president's security team requested additional security resources that the U.S. Secret Service or the Department of Homeland Security rebuffed is absolutely false. The next day, Secretary Mayorkas said, that is an unequivocally false assertion. We had not received any request for additional security measures that were rebuffed. But 5 days later, the Washington Post said this: top officials repeatedly rejected requests from Donald Trump's security detail for more personnel. The next day, the New York Times said this: Mr. Guglielmi acknowledged that the Secret Service had turned down some requests for additional federal security assets for Mr. Trump's detail. So which is it? Because both statements can't be true. Were you guessing or lying when you said you didn't turn down requests from President Trump's detail?
Neither, sir, and I appreciate the question.
Well, what were you doing? Because those statements don't jive.
So what I can tell you is that for the event in Butler, there were no requests that were denied.
They asked for additional help in some form or another. You told them no. How many times did you tell them no, and what did you tell them no to?
Again, I cannot speak to specific incidents, but I can tell you in general terms, the Secret Service is judicious with their resources based on...
What does some requests mean? How many times? Some indicate requests is plural. So more than once they asked for additional help and you turned them down. What did they ask for and how many times did you turn them down? Pretty basic questions.
So again, without having all of the details in front of me, sir, what I can tell you is that there are times...
You didn't get briefed on how many times you turned down the Trump detail when they asked for additional help?
I'm sorry.
You didn't get briefed on that before you came to this hearing knowing you were going to get asked that question?
What I can tell you is that in generic terms, when details make a request, there are times that there are alternate ways to cover off on that threat or that risk.
But that's not what he said. He said they were denied certain requests, some requests. This is your spokesperson, not me talking. This is the secret.
Your agency has a no-fail mission, and on Saturday, July 13th, your agency spectacularly failed. The failure resulted in the death of Corey Comparator and serious injury to two other rally attendees, David Dutch and James Copenhaver, besides the injuries to President Trump. It is unfathomable that a 20-year-old on the radar of Secret Service and local law enforcement before President Trump went on stage was able to climb onto the roof of a building with a rifle and fire off multiple rounds before he was neutralized. Was Mr. Crooks acting alone?
Again, I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation.
Was he just a lone gunman?
I would have to refer you to the FBI's investigation for motive.
Yeah, so this hearing was an absolute train wreck from the perspective of the fact that this person is not really answering questions, right? You're not learning anything, okay? You're not getting any information out of her, but hey, don't worry. The GOP will send her a strongly worded letter, okay? Hopefully more will happen, okay? I'm just joking because it is Democrats and Republicans that seem to be on the same page with the fact that, hey, you screwed up. You screwed up big time, and you should be fired. You should resign. And again, because you're not giving us answers, we have questions about things like, for example, DEI and what role did that play in this assassination attempt occurring, especially considering how you want to diversify the Secret Service and you're not worried about qualifications as much. And allegedly, Trump was given a JV team when it comes to Secret Service agents.
Could you elaborate why you want 1/3 of the Secret Service to be women?
I've never stated that I want 1/3 of the Secret Service to be women.
30% or something. You had some target. No?
Let me ask you one more question. You found explosives in the shooter's possession. Is that correct?
The FBI found explosives.
Do we know who directed this young man how to make those explosives?
I believe that the FBI is still looking into that on their investigation.
Ms. Cheatle, you said that the buck stops with me, and I agree. I don't think you should resign. I think you should have been fired. Ma'am, you are a DEI horror story. I've told my daughter multiple times, my wife and my daughter, we talk to her all the time about how she's going to succeed in life. She'll succeed in life by achieving. Ma'am, you have not achieved today. You've let the American public down. If it was up to me, you'd be gone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, she is a DEI horror story. What almost happened to Trump was a DEI horror story, but she won't let that happen to her because if you look at her security detail that she used when walking into Congress, doesn't seem like there was much DEI when it comes to the people that were protecting her.
You failed, Cheatle, in assassinating Trump. You failed. Satan isn't all powerful. You're on the wrong side. You reap what you sow, Cheatle. God is good. God is in control, Cheatle.
Yeah, so I'm extremely fascinated to know why in the world did this woke Secret Service director not assign the big, tall, strong, strapping white males that she's using to protect herself. Why did she assign these individuals to Trump, right? We saw Trump be surrounded by a bunch of women who could barely holster their guns, right? But yet, when you look at her security detail, I'm like, it looks like she's much more concerned about her life than the life of the former president, which is, again, her job to protect. So, again, there are a lot of legitimate questions that were asked during this hearing, okay, about why this happened. But you know we could not have a hearing without the ghetto congresswomen of America boohoo, whining, crying racism and bigotry because of legitimate questions about why the former president was allowed to almost be assassinated.
Now, Director Cheatle, you have noted that numerous investigations are ongoing related to the Secret Service response and that we can expect a report in the next 60 days. With the election nearly 100 days away, that is an unacceptable timeline, and it makes people less safe. It also allows my colleagues across the aisle, Republicans, additional time to spread dangerous misinformation, which also puts people in harm's way. Some Republicans have exploited this moment to continue to attack progress towards racial justice and gender equity in America. Disappointing, but not surprising. I hesitate to repeat their racist and sexist tropes, but in summary, Republicans have wrongfully and shamefully stated that hiring women and people of color hindered the response to the shooting. Now, this is part and parcel of Republican strategy to constantly attack necessary diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, to undermine the contributions that women, people of color, the disability community, and others make to this country each and every day. And it is disgraceful. In the wake of gun violence and tragic loss of life, Republicans are ignoring solutions like gun safety reform and instead trotting out sexist tropes. Can't say I'm surprised.
Left off. Director Cheatle, was the incident on July 13th due to DEI, or rather systemic failures in communication and potentially safety protocols?
The incident on the 13th has nothing to do with DEI. The incident on the 13th has to do with a failure or a gap either in planning or communication.
Thank you so much. In fact, I have a few articles that I will enter into the record once I wrap up that actually acknowledge a number of women specifically for their valor in their service, whether it's been in various levels of law enforcement. But, you know, I want to stick here for just a second, because earlier you had a conversation in which there was a discussion about training. And I want to talk about training, and I want to talk about the fact that there's been a little bit of dancing around as it relates to this being a suspicious person and this being a situation that was perceived to be a threat. And it seems as if there's a different analysis that takes place. One of my questions has to do with if you have any bias training that your officers undergo. And the reason that I ask that, because as a civil rights lawyer, I have learned so many times in having to deal with law enforcement that there usually is not a perception of a threat when it is a young white male, even if they are carrying a long gun. Yet a lot of times, at least in this country, when it comes to law enforcement, there is a perceived threat just by somebody having a little bit more melanin in their skin. So I'm curious to know, because a lot of times, one of the things that we have consistently pushed for on my side of things, and when I say my side, is once we are looking at a tragedy in which law enforcement made an error, is the bias training and whether or not our officers are getting it. So I'm curious to know, in some of the training that you talk about that is part of your budget, has bias training been part of that?
Yes, it is.
Guys, I got to tell you, we must do better as a country, guys. We really have to do better when it comes to sending some of these people to Congress, because we're definitely not sending our best and our brightest, because these are some of the stupidest people I have ever seen, right? I've never seen anybody as dumb as some of these ghetto Congress women that are sitting up in the halls of Congress asking dumb ass questions about how the shooter probably was not spotted because he was white, right? This is what Jasmine Crotchet is insinuating, right? She's insinuating that maybe the shooter was allowed to almost blow the president's brain out because he's white, right? Therefore, law enforcement didn't see him as a threat. If he was black, they would have recognized the threat immediately and apprehended him and not let Trump take the stage. This is what she's saying, okay? Although, I mean, you know, the left tries to paint a stereotype of the typical mass shooter as some white male, right? I mean, this guy quite literally looked like the stereotype that the left frequently puts out there as what we should look for when we're talking about a mass shooter, right? This is what they put out there. So I'm not entirely sure how racism has anything to do with this, okay? But who knows? This is the connection that Jasmine Crotchet is making because, again, these guys can't talk about any issue. They can't talk about one thing in Congress without boohoo, whining, and crying racism. They just can't do it. They can't do it. Just like Joy Reid can't analyze any situation on TV, any politics at all without crying racism, sexism, bigotry, which again is what you just heard Ayanna Pressley do, where she basically talked about how, well, I don't like Republicans attacking DEI. Well, listen, in this situation, it is crucial to ask questions about DEI, considering how the Secret Service has a DEI program where they're like, hey, we need to hire women, right? We need to have 30% of our force be women. Now, when you're doing that and you got a bunch of women surrounding the president who, physically speaking, cannot protect the president of the United States, they just don't have the physical capabilities of doing so, okay? That's the biological reality. When you have that, yeah, I think it's totally legitimate to ask questions. That's not sexism. It's not bigotry. It's not a trope. That's just the reality. Now, again, Ayanna Pressley is one of these members of the squad, just like all of them, that spends hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in security. I want to see how many women are protecting Ayanna Pressley, okay? And Ayanna Pressley is not a small woman, right? So again, I'm trying to figure out, Ayanna, are you going to put your money where your mouth is? Because if you want to put your money where your mouth is, I want to see your security team be made up of mostly women. That's what I want to see. Since it is sexist to question diversity quotas and the qualifications of women protecting the president of the United States, okay, cool. If that's what you really believe, your security detail needs to be mostly women, or else you're a bigot, right? Or else you're full of shit, just like Kim Cheatle is full of shit. But again, my point is that we have to stop sending these embarrassing ass people to Congress, right? I'm sick and tired of being embarrassed by these people, man. These individuals do nothing but race bait in Congress. That's all they do. I never hear them talk about anything else besides race. Golly, man, we cannot get to the bottom of anything when you have individuals always boohoo, whining, crying racism over everything or sexism. And it's just like, bro, at the end of the day, we're asking questions. These are legitimate questions. Do you want to have some accountability or no, right? Apparently they don't. Apparently they don't. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.